What I do is I look at the very top level, sort of the macro top down, and how the world operates. And, you know, just on a very simple level, if you tax people who work and you pay people who don't work, do I need to say the next sentence to you? Don't be surprised if you find a lot of people not working. I mean, the next one, which is sort of the same type of thing. If you tax rich people and give the money to poor people, don't be surprised if you have a lot of poor people and very few rich people. People respond to incentives, and they really, really do. And nowhere is it more important than in states. Here you have 50 competitive models going on, each state trying in its own right to be the attractor of business. And that's what each state's trying to do to create prosperity for its own citizens. I mean, if you look at it, and let me just try it with you here. If you have two locations, A and B, if you raise taxes in A and you lower them in B, producers and manufacturers and people in jobs are going to move from to. I mean, is that too complicated? You know, trying to get that across in California is absolutely impossible. I mean, I left 4 years ago because I wrote a paper, California, Who Are You? And when the governor switched sides, and he did switch sides, he became a girly man. Just joking. But he did. He really switched sides at that side. I said, I just didn't want to sit here and watch the destruction of the state I love so very, very much. You can look at these states, and I'm going to open it up for questions with you. And I'm not going to go through it in great detail because you all have at least access to the books that Stephen Moore and I have written together called Rich States, Poor States. Every year we come out with these books. We go through each state. We rank you all. We try to look at it in ways that meet the academic requirements of how do you bring prosperity to your state? How do you get you going? I mean, you could look at micro examples. I mean, what I like to do is look at pairings of two states. I mean, the one right now I love is Tennessee and Kentucky. I mean, Tennessee and Kentucky 35, 40 years ago were the identical state. Both of them in the backwash of America. Kentucky raised taxes dramatically, put in all sorts of the programs. It's one of the worst run states in the nation with high tax rates. Tennessee never got an income tax. Property taxes are extremely low in Tennessee. And if you look at the paths those two states have taken, it's amazing how they've differed. I mean, Tennessee is a very prosperous state, and Kentucky is really a terribly unprosperous state, and yet they're borderline there. I come from Ohio. If you look, I mean, I was born in Youngstown, Ohio, and I've been a Buckeye. My family has for probably 150 years. If you look at what happened in Ohio in 1974 when they put in the progressive income tax, Ohio was the one state that was the place where the Fortune 500 had more headquarters offices than any other state in the nation. Now look at it, it's devastation. They West Virginianized my home state. My view is you're going to have a bomb go off, and I'll tell you why. As you know, the President of the United States, when he took office, made a decision, a strategic decision, not to undo President Bush's tax cuts proactively. He made a decision to leave the legislation alone and let it expire. Now, as you know, that expires, Bush's tax cuts expire on January 1st, 2011. Now, let me just ask you, that means that the highest marginal income tax rate federally goes from 35% to 39.6%. The inheritance tax goes from 0 to 55%. The dividend tax goes up. The capital gains tax goes up. There are lots of other taxes that go up as well on January 1st, 2011. For example, in the health bill that was just passed the House, they have a 5% surcharge on incomes on the wealthy. That goes up in 2011. There's a huge one coming in cap and trade. If you use the Waxman-Markey bill out of the House, that has about a $500 billion tax increase there. Just to give you a flavor of what that number is, total income taxes collected this year about $1.2 trillion. If you take $500 billion, that's about, what, 40% add-on to the income tax. There are other legislations that are going through. State and local governments, as you may know, have raised taxes dramatically recently. So when you look at 2011, the border, the border, the chronological border between 2010 and 2011, there's going to be a very large tax increase on January 1st, 2011. Now, if you know they're going to raise taxes next year, what do you do this year? You accelerate all the income you possibly can into this year to take it through the tax codes at lower rates. There's a huge tax shift that's going to go. Now, my view is, when you look at all these taxes, and I'll tell you why, my view is that impact alone will be somewhere in the neighborhood of about 3 to 4% in real GDP terms. Now, what that means is that for 2010, real GDP is going to be about 3 to 4% higher than it otherwise should be, because people are moving timing of income and moving it into 2010. It's not unlike the cash for clunkers. Did all of you see what happened to auto sales the day they stopped the cash for clunkers? Just, it fell right off the cliff. It's not unlike the subsidies for new home buyers. Can you imagine what's going to happen when they take off that subsidy to new home buyers? What's going to happen to home sales, housing construction? I mean, all of that stuff. So my guess is that there's going to be the income in 2010 is going to be about 3 to 4% higher than it otherwise should be. But also, that's going to be stolen from 2011, which my view is that you're going to see 2011 about 3 to 4% lower than it otherwise should be. If our economy were flat, and it's not, we're growing, but if it were flat, what that means is there's going to be a drop-off between the 2 years of somewhere between 6 and 8% of GDP. You know, when you look at these budgets, Missouri, more than anyone or as much as anyone, needs to really become competitive. Because my best guess is that when you hit 2011, the train literally goes off the tracks. And when that does, you need to be prepared to figure out how you're going to handle the problems.
If you could throw out the current federal income tax system and start out with a clean sheet of paper, what would it look like?
Well, let me tell you what I do and what I did. I worked for a guy named Jerry Brown, Mike State, when he ran for the presidency, if any of you remember. What we had as a proposal, you remember his 13% flat tax? Any of you remember that? I don't know if you do or not. Yeah, I did that 13% flat tax. He's really quite a good person. We got rid of all federal taxes, all of them. Well, with one exception. We kept sin taxes. And the reason we kept sin taxes is because their purpose is not so much to raise revenues as it is to alter behavior. You know, our government, for some reason, thinks that drunken people shouldn't shoot each other when they're smoking. Just teasing. But you keep all the sin taxes, and you get rid of every federal tax. And when I mean every federal tax, I mean every one. Personal income tax, corporate income tax, capital gains tax, estate tax, the tariffs, payroll taxes, Medicare tax, every single tax. And in their stead have 2 flat rate taxes. One on personal unadjusted gross income and one on business net sales at the same rate. If you did that today, you could match all federal revenues. Now, I had some deductions, which I'd be more than happy to go through with you. They're all economic deductions, not political deductions. If you had that, you could match current revenues, all federal revenues, with 2 taxes, one on net sales and one on personal unadjusted gross income, at a tax rate of 11.5%. No other federal tax, starting from $1 to $N. We did not have any individual deductions, and the reason for it's pretty simple. Jerry put it, I thought, very well. He said, you know, what's the benefit of a tax deduction to someone with no income? Did I somehow miss that in Econ 1? It's not very beneficial. What you do with deductions is you help the more affluent of the poor relative to the least affluent of the poor, but then you force much higher rates at the upper end, which do in massive amounts of economic distortion. That's the tax that I would put in the federal level, just flat right across the board. Bingo.